Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our webinar from National Wildlife Federation and the Campus Race to Zero Waste. Webinars focused on tackling plastic pollution on campus. And I already have one question. So the presentation is 1 hour today. We are recording it, so it will be available on the website within a few days. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free. We will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of the webinar after all of our presentations. However, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box. You can also use the Q&A box as well. I'll go back and forth and make sure we cover everything. If we are unable to cover all questions, I'll be sure to follow up with individuals to respond to their questions. And if folks could give me a quick chat to let me know that you are able, the audio sounds okay, that would be great. Perfect. All right. Oh, Alyssa, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. So the agenda for today, I'm gonna start out and give a short overview of our new guide, Stemming the Tide. And within that guide, I'll talk a little bit about the wildlife and human impacts from plastic pollution, talk a little bit also about some of the individual action opportunities around plastic pollution, as well as campus wide action opportunities. I will then pass it off to Cassie Hage from Washington University in St. Louis, and then Amber Saxton at George Mason University. All right. So this is our new guide. We National Wildlife Federation and the Campus Race to Zero Waste, we published this guide, I believe, in early September. We're really excited about it. It's focused on plastic pollution. It does highlight touching on the impacts to humans, the impacts to wildlife, as well as highlighting different opportunities for individual students, faculty, and staff to take action to address plastic pollution, as well as campus-wide campaigns, policies, practices, et cetera, to address plastic pollution. There is also a section within the guide that talks about recycling. The next section focuses in on education and awareness around the topic of plastic pollution and action opportunities, as well as some of the information towards the end of the guide kind of gets into the details of the plastic recycling process, some of the issues related to plastics recycling, as well as details, more information around plastics 1 through 7. Folks, whenever you recycle, you always turn over your bottle or your container to see what numbers on it, because that helps you determine whether or not you can recycle it. So we talk a little bit about that as well. So this guide, it's an online guide. It's online. It's a PDF. And I will, if you haven't seen it, I think it's a wonderful guide. We have a lot of great campus stories within it. I will share the link if you haven't seen it already after this webinar. We've also pushed out a couple fun quizzes to just kind of get folks interested in the topic, and just a fun way to engage around the topic and around the new guide. All right. So jumping in on what is the plastic pollution problem. So if you're not if you're not familiar, oh, okay. So I also have a couple. Yeah, I'm just checking in on our chat. Yes, the guide is available to the public. It is a free resource, uh, so you're more than welcome to share it with your students, your faculty, your peers, whoever's interested. And if you need a different format, please let me know. I'd be happy to share that with you. So, what is the plastic pollution problem? So, essentially, we have just increased our plastic production over the last several decades. So, if you take a look at the slide that we're looking at, there was a study out of University of California, Santa Barbara, and it was the first ever global analysis of plastic production. And what it said is that between 2002 and 2015, so that is 13 years, we made the exact same amount of plastics that we made between 1950 and 2002. So then you're looking at 52 years versus 13 years. So we've increased our plastic production um, immensely over the last couple of decades, and we've that is our problem, because there's immense impacts to humans, to wildlife, to habitat. Um, we have some challenges around recycling to get those plastic materials back into a second and third life. So the plastic pollution probably problem isn't just one problem. There's kind of several different pieces related to that. And I before we jump into the next slide, which focuses on the impacts on humans, I wanted to do a quick poll. Here, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So this is what is the most, so this is just quizzing everybody that's joining. What is the most common ocean litter? All right, give folks a chance to respond. All right. All right, so it's looking like plastic shopping bags are winning. However, according to the 2017 International Coastal Cleanup, which is sponsored and organized by the Ocean Conservancy across the world, it is cigarette butts are the most common ocean litter. So that's just interesting bit of information. We'll talk a little bit about the International Coastal Cleanup later in the webinar, but it's a great opportunity. They get a lot of data from the different cleanups across the country, or yeah, across the world. So they always have quite a bit of data to share. Here, I'm gonna share the results real quick so you can see that. All right. So moving into impacts on humans. So there, I'm not going to get into the details specifically about the different chemicals, and what the specific impact might be, but just kind of like in summary, there are toxic chemical releases during the manufacturing of plastic materials. So plastics, plastic packaging, plastic materials that we use for drinking and eating, um, our clothes, that type of thing. And it's not just the ingredients during the manufacturing process, but it's also the waste products that are coming out of that manufacturing process. There's also issues that you run into when plastic has to be discarded. If it's not being recycled, it's going into the landfill, and it could possibly be, get into our fresh waterways, which, then impacts our drinking water. Also, whenever plastics are getting into the seawater, our ocean water, whether it's our bays or our oceans, there's a couple different things that'll happen. That once it gets into the ocean water is actually absorbing some of those ingredients out of some of those toxins out of plastic materials. And so those are dangerous pollutants such as PCBs and other things. And then additionally, if there's a plastic bag or a plastic, gas container, whatever it is that's been floating around in the ocean for a long time, it'll start to break apart. And then it goes into different sea creatures eat that. And of course, humans rely heavily on the ocean for different things. A food source is one of them. And so then those toxins then get into our diet. And studies show, there's a lot of information out there. There's a great list of references within the guide, but essentially, when they talk about toxins within plastic products, they can link that to birth defects. They'll link it to different types of cancers. They link it to child development, attacking immune systems, so impacting immune systems. So it's kind of a slew of different negative impacts that are involved with the toxins leaching out of the plastic products, part of manufacturing, and then part of once it's discarded, however it's discarded, if it's not discarded properly. And, different plastic materials, they'll, they'll, there's, you'll find a little bit different information about different materials and how long it actually takes for them to break down, but essentially it's a very, very, very long time. So the idea is to not have them go into the landfill, because they won't break down. They'll be there for a very long time. All right. So moving into the impacts on wildlife, that was one of the main reasons, a couple years ago, that National Wildlife Federation took over the management of the campus Race to Zero Waste. We were one of the issues that we were focused on was plastic pollution, because plastic pollution is really impacting marine sea life, fish, marine birds, mammals, and that type of thing. And we saw this as a great opportunity to help make that connection for colleges and universities that were working to reduce their waste and increase their recycling, help them connect it to the different natural environments they live in, or their watershed definite, eventually will connect into the ocean. So a couple of different stats on this. And it's kind of broken down by different types of marine wildlife. So they talk about sea turtles, which is always kind of the, I guess, species that you frequently see when talking about plastic pollution and impacts on wildlife. So studies suggest that as many as 50% of sea turtles are ingesting plastic and dying because of it. Um, for another example is seals and sea lions are getting entangled in plastic trash, including plastic bags, so they could possibly get it around their necks and get caught up in nets and that type of thing. I think we've seen unfortunate photos of like the soda bottles around different animals, which is really sad. You also run into, and I mentioned this earlier, is some wildlife will inadvertently eat it. It looks like something that they want to eat, but it's not. It's not food. And then moving on to the next slide, they some wildlife in the oceans might also inadvertently eat it, like it's an accident. Like you have they talk about whales, dolphins, and porpoises mistake plastic pollution as food. But like this picture of this whale, this is a humpback whale, I think off the coast of California. Humpback whales basically open their mouth and take in a whole bunch of seawater and whatever comes with it. That's how they eat. And so plastics can get into their systems in that way. And then this last bullet, which is a really direct connection to human impacts, is fish are vulnerable to microplastics. So little bits of plastic that are breaking apart and ending up in the ocean is, you know, fish take water in through their gills. So microplastics are coming in through their gills, and that's not something they're purposely doing. That's how it's happening. So that is then impacting the fish, causing the death. Then, of course, if that gets into the food chain, that's impacting humans. All right, so I'm going to run through my slides a little bit quickly so I can pass this over to Cassie. I just checked the time and realized I was chatting quite a bit. So I wanted to give you one more. I want to give you a quick test on what I just said. So this next poll: what sea turtle species are currently listed as endangered? Right, I'm going to let that come in a little bit. Oh, and it's yeah. I think this audience definitely knows. Um, yeah, this is okay. I think this is an easy one. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling, and I'm gonna share the results because it was all of the above. There's actually only one sea turtle. It's called a flatback sea turtle that isn't currently listed as endangered, and the reason that they say is because there's just not enough data to support that at this time. I'm gonna close this. All right. So I'm just going to detail a little bit about some of the action ideas within the guide, and then I'll move on to Cassie. So the guide has a whole section on easy action, so easy ways to reduce your use of plastics, reuse, and recycle. It's really focused on the individual student, faculty, or staff. I put a star at the bottom because COVID-19 has changed a lot of things, a lot of practices. Um, in our lives. So that's something to definitely take into consideration when looking at this guide and thinking about these ideas. So right now, it's a lot of stores, a lot of vendors are not accepting reusable items like coffee mugs, reusable bags. I hope that changes once we're past this. So that's just something I wanted to note. But really, some of the ideas listed are, reusable items, choosing items that are not made of plastic or packaged in plastic. All right. And then next is kind of jumping into this to some of the campus wide actions. It's always a good idea to do a waste audit because that helps you identify what's going into the trash and what your biggest problems are, what your biggest challenges are, but also what your biggest opportunities are. A caveat there currently, though, is safety and risk around COVID-19 right now. So maybe not an option for the campus community right now, but hopefully, campuses have been doing waste audits for years. It's a great learning experience for everybody involved and gets a lot of great data. Also, we talk about interviewing campus stakeholders. So, really just finding out who's making purchases, what policies are in place, and what can be changed, how campuses can be pushed in the direction of maybe changing some purchasing policies and use policies on campus. I mentioned here the Campus Race to Zero Waste. If you haven't participated in that program in the past, it's a great competition. It really helps you um, benchmark where you're at and set goals to where you want to be. There's a lot of different category opportunities within the competition for you to engage. And I can definitely we have a couple webinars this fall to talk more about that competition. And then kind of go continuing on with campus wide campaigns. There's a lot of examples within the guide Stemming the Tide about campus policies addressing plastic. So we have a whole section on bottled water bans, plastic straw bans, plastic bag bans, and then polystyrene bans, which is styrofoam. That's a very common name that people use for polystyrene. Um, and this photo on the screen is Aquinas College in Michigan. I like to use this one because what they did is, they're kind of promoting their water filling stations and they have the wildlife connection there. They were talking about the plastic pollution impacts on the shark population. So that's why there's a little shark above their water filling station. And one thing I wanted to note, whenever you're thinking about passing these types of policies on campus, be sure to think about all of the different audience, your target audience, and who you'll be serving and engaging in these policies to make sure that everybody can engage. And, for example, I mentioned here straw bans are a great step to reduce your plastic on campus. However, please be aware that not that some people need plastic straws. They need to use that to be able to drink efficiently. So please just keep those things in mind when you're thinking about new policies on campus and making changes. All right, so quickly, another section is on reuse. So, fix it fairs, campus free cycle events, and move out events are great opportunities to get students, faculty, and staff to go through what they don't need that's still in good shape and donate it or give it back to other folks on campus that are interested. All right, I am actually, I had a poll question, but I think I'm gonna skip it right now because I don't want to spend too much more time. So within the guide, there is a whole section on recycling plastic. So it's really important when you're focusing on recycling on campus to increase recycling is to really be sure it's clear what can be recycled, how to recycle it to reduce contamination, where it can be recycled, and why. Why is it important to recycle? And I just encourage that folks that, your haulers are pretty good about communicating changes, but it's always good to check in with them regularly, find out if anything has changed. Is the allowed contamination rate, has that increased? Has that decreased? Are numbers 1 through 7 no longer allowed or 1 through 3 no longer allowed? Um, and it's always fun to find out where your materials are going, like where are they going and what is their next life? Because that's really good information to share with the community. I think it really makes a difference when people understand that their actions are really making a difference, that it's going into a second life, recycled content, a second life for them to do that. It encourages people to continue to do that. All right. Education and awareness. One thing I'll just highlight here is I think it's really important to kind of bring it home. Highlight impacts on humans, highlight impacts on local wildlife. Um, whatever it is, I think people are really interested in taking action when something's impacting their own hometown or their own community. All right. So I apologize for going that through that so quickly, but I really wanted to get to our presenters because they have some great stories to share. So I'm going to pass this over to Cassie now, and I'm going to give you Cassie. Let's see. There you go.
All right, great. So my name is Cassie Hage. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Sustainability at Washington University in St. Louis. Just to give you a little bit of context about who we are, is we're a private university in St. Louis, Missouri. We've got about 16,000 students and about the same number of full-time staff and faculty. So we've been really fortunate in that sustainability has been identified as one of the top priorities of the university. So it makes it a lot easier to leverage this when we're trying to make some of those larger systemic changes to address plastic pollution and other environmental challenges. And specifically, the university has said that Washington University is reducing its environmental impact while developing new research aimed at forging a more sustainable future. So the timeline for the university, again, to put this in context, we kind of started our efforts around greenhouse gas inventory and developing a strategic plan for sustainable operations. And that it's specifically named quite a few goals, but carbon reduction was a part of that. And then we built capacity over time, and now have a very robust sustainability program. And the Office of Sustainability is charged with kind of stewarding many of these initiatives and also reporting outcomes. And then in 2009, Washington University became the first university in North America to ban the sale of water bottles. I'm sorry, bottled water, which is one of the initiatives that I want to highlight today. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. There we go. Um, so, what the process looks like. Chris, are you able to make that go back? Oh, thanks. Oh, okay, sorry. So there were quite a few things that had to align in order to make this university-wide policy go into effect. So it started with an individual who had an idea, who was well positioned in the university to advocate for this. There was quite a bit of student activism that we were able to tap into in order to develop broad support and kind of convince administration that there was willingness to move forward with an initiative like this. Um, and so over about a year period, this was identified as an initiative that was important to the community, that was feasible, and also that could be kind of a big, bold statement that would raise our profile in sustainability and higher education. So all of those were things that we've been able to leverage. There were a couple of things that made this really more successful than I think had it not been done in concert. So rather than just saying we're not going to sell bottled water, um, it was really important to build up the infrastructure so that alternatives were still readily available. So we retrofitted about 100 different water fountains so that they had a water bottle filling attachment. and also installed many of these water bottle filling stations across campus. Um, Water bottle giveaways are also a pretty regular thing on campus from a variety of different departments and activities. So having your own water bottle wasn't a barrier either. And each building had at least one of these water bottle filling stations. And then we've also coupled this with ongoing education and outreach. So from the moment students set foot on our campus, they understand that this is an important part of our culture. And it's gotten to the point where if you go into a meeting with whether it's staff or students, this is pre-COVID, but you see everyone around a table with their water bottles, sitting on the table, which is pretty exciting. Or you see students with backpacks and they all have their reusable water bottle. So it really has become part of our sustainability culture. And then we also, at the beginning and in kind of an ongoing way, we were able to generate a fair amount of publicity around this. So the university, of course, is appreciative of the publicity component, and that helps fuel some of the other initiatives that we advocate for as well. Then in 2015, we revisited the policy and did some analytics, mainly in response to a study that came out that said when you ban bottled water, people will revert to sugary alternatives, which are, of course, less healthy and doesn't really achieve our goals because many of them are served in single-use containers. So we analyzed data for both fountain drinks and for bottles, and saw that in both cases there's actually a decrease in the number of servings and the number of containers. So we were able to publish this as a counterpoint to what a lot of universities had attached themselves to. So we've been able to incorporate this policy across campus. So technically, the policy is no bottled water sold on campus. But if a department wanted to buy some and provide it, they could, in theory, do that. Many don't, but some do. But for big events, we have a challenge, particularly with events like commencement, that are very visible, and it can also be very hot. And it's kind of there are a lot of visitors coming to campus who aren't necessarily bringing their own water bottles. So we've partnered with the commencement planning team and have experimented with a wide variety of different containers. And we've landed on this boxed water option as a preferred alternative. And we do a lot to also reduce the use overall. So a lot of strategies built in there. And we have resources on our website that can go into more detail on these. So that was kind of our launch point to the plastic prevention programs. But we have a number of initiatives that are more recently put into place. So one is reusable to-go boxes. We've been piloting that in different ways for the last couple of years, but with COVID precautions, we've really ramped it up and reinvested in the program. So we've got a lot of publicity going on at the moment to try to educate students about the need to request them and then also return them. And then we've also been giving out these reusable bamboo cutlery sets to provide an alternative to the plastic ones that are now on campus because of, again, COVID. And we've had 500 students request these in the last month or so, which is pretty remarkable. They do have to go through a little tutorial in order to get them. So we're doing some education at the same time, and really pleased to see how well received it has been. In kind of a normal year, we have a number of other initiatives, including straws upon request that went into effect last year. We've saved thousands of straws and money also that way. We do pre and post consumer composting, and we do have some compostable plastics on campus. Typically, we have a lot of reusable dishes available and silverware for dine-in use. We have reusable cups with RFID tags to activate fountain drinks, and that's been really good at reducing the amount of disposable cups that are being used. Um, we have bottomless coffee programs where it's a subscription for the semester, and then you can just refill your coffee cup. We do bulk condiments in the dining spaces. And then for quite a while, we haven't had plastic bags or styrofoam available. And then building on this, we also have brought many of these concepts into our green event program. And we've had this loan program we call the Greenware program, where events can borrow a set of reusable plasticware, use it, return it, and we've partnered with dining services to be able to wash them and then recirculate them. And over time, we've replaced thousands of um, individual spoons, forks, plates, etc., and have really supported the interest in having these reusable products available by removing some of the barriers. We've also created a preferred caterer guide to enable or to identify caterers who are able to support these zero waste initiatives and provide either compostable plastics or no plastics. And then this one's really exciting. That is definitely a win-win. So we worked with our vendor to audit all of our containers and do a right fit solution for the containers. And just by eliminating or like by finding a bag that actually fits the containers, you save the custodian's time in installing these, but you also save um, over 15 tons of plastic a year. That's a lot in plastic bags. So, a tremendous amount of plastic that's avoided before it even comes onto campus. And then our custodial teams also identified an opportunity to not line the recycling bins in labs because they can't have liquids or like soda in there anyway. And then this is also reducing thousands of bags again before they even need to be used. So I have a handful of links here that we can share to give you more information about any of these, and I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, Cassie, I do have a couple questions for you. I'm going to ask you one, and then we'll hold the rest till the end of the webinar. So the first one is, Cassie, how do you work with food vendors on campus? Our current food vendor is Sodexo, and they have said a plastic bottle ban would be impossible because of their purchasing agreements with Coca-Cola. Is this true, or did you deal with difficulties around second tier suppliers?
So I'm sure there are nuances with every contract situation, but we also have a contract with Coke, and while they don't like it, they abided by it. So it is something that we have to fight against. I think at least once a year there'll be some proposal about well, can we do it this way or can we do it this way? Can we do some more flavored water? And flavored water is actually allowable, um, but they have been very persistent at trying to counter our policy, and we've had to really make sure that the contract managers understand the purpose of the policy and can help reinforce it. And make sure that when those opportunities come up, that they're having a conversation with us before agreeing to moving forward. So Bon Appetit is our food service provider. And I also will say that the university did absorb a loss. So I think $150,000 is what was estimated in a loss of sales of bottled water. But since it was a commitment, we absorbed that cost. Um,
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So Amber, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your presentation. So if folks will just give me one moment, I'm going to stop sharing. So just,
Thank you, Christine. Actually, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay. Well, my name is Amber Saxton, Program Manager in the Office of Sustainability at George Mason. Just to give you a little profile of our mini city, as the guide calls universities, we are located in Northern Virginia, Fairfax being our main campus. We have about 8.8 million square feet of built environment and about 112,000 gross metric tons equivalent of GHG. Some fast facts: we have about 37,000 students, 6,600 of which live on campus, so we're largely a commuter campus, and we serve about 1.5 million meals in our 3 campus dining halls. We have about 1,900 faculty and 2,800 staff. And just a quick timeline of Sustainable Mason. In 1996, we signed the Dolores Declaration. In 2007, our Office of Sustainability was established. And in 2010, we did our first climate action plan. In 2014, we were the first university in Virginia to achieve HE Stars Gold. And we earned that again in 2017, and we are submitting this month and hope to earn that again in 2020. Additionally, this year we're doing a climate action plan update, and we're actually launching the Mason Sustainability Council, which will be headed by our Senior Vice President for Finance and our Provost. And it's an important step of institutional commitment, along with Mason's launch of the Institute for a Sustainable Earth in 2019, which was in recognition of the need to take action on the climate emergency crisis. So here's just some of our progress to date. To do with today's webinar, chiefly our 3.5 million plastic water bottles replaced through our water bottle refill station program, which we continue to expand, and our 85,000 pounds that we've diverted from our waste stream at Move Out through our Patriot Pack Out program since 2014. We have also invested over $500,000 into student-led research or infrastructure improvements towards sustainability since 2011 through our Patriot Green Fund. And we also have composting and food recovery in the campus dining halls, as I mentioned. The food recovery is led by a Food Recovery Network, a student group. And we also are a part of the yearly Recyclemania Game Day basketball competition. In fact, this year we earned first place per capita for diversion, so we're very excited about that. And actually, I'll just note that Recyclemania was my first experience with sustainability at university campuses. It taught me a few really important things. First, that you need a robust alternative stream for waste, and the best alternative is compost, since it's a closed loop system. And to be able to compost, you have to switch your purchasing from plastics to compostables. So, and then secondly, you need a lot of partners to make a zero waste event or system work, and to build a sustainable culture on campus. So for that specific event, every year we work with the arena, we work with Mason Athletics, Mason Dining, facilities, housekeeping, and a bunch of other folks who are really dedicated to sustainability as well. And then quickly, here's just our waste profile. We're trying to expand our composting operations beyond the 50 tons at Mason's 3 dining halls. The Northern Virginia infrastructure is gaining momentum in this area. And again, expanding beyond back of house dining, you need to transition away from plastics to compostables. So it is an institutional undertaking. We also have 2 tons of coffee composting run by our office and student volunteers through our online volunteering platform. We have about 628 tons of recycling in these categories, and about 3,000 tons of trash that is incinerated at the local mass burn plant. Here are some of our waste diversion efforts. I mentioned the Green Game and Patriot Pack Out previously. Also, facilities management folks do a really great job diverting about 40 tons of surplus goods per year, which as a Mason employee, you can actually put a ticket in for and they come and pick up durable goods, electronics, and the like, and then they sell it or donate it. They also do a lot of hard work in the recycling yard, dealing with contamination issues in our plastics in our plastics. So that could be food or food residues or sorting, and they try to divert as much as possible. We also obviously have a lot of campus cleanups and waste audits where we get students involved and have donation and reuse programs. Additionally, we have a maker space where students can create upcycled clothing items out of fabrics or plastics, and even have a upcycled fashion show. Um, so to transition for a minute, besides just speaking about what Mason is doing, one of my roles today is actually to speak on the plastics pollution space in general and really rethinking plastics. I'll have reference material at the end of my slides for you to explore in more depth, but I'm going to just scroll through a couple of slides with facts that paint the picture of essentially how we cannot tackle plastics pollution primarily through recycling, since the recycling system is essentially broken. So here are just some start facts to contend with as we rethink this space and how universities should tackle this issue. You can see the amount of consumption or rates of usage versus the rates of actual recycling. And the percent recycled content is in some of those same items that are being made. My assertion is that the plastics recycling system is essentially broken, and asterisks, it was probably never working, it was just propped up. So here are some of the reasons why it had a shaky foundation to start with. It was built with an onus on the end user at the bin, with no real responsibility on the plastics production end to reduce. Acceptability is based on commodities markets, yet 3 through 7s are chiefly not very profitable and hard to recycle. According to the Northern Virginia Waste Management Board, local jurisdictions spend over $3.6 million a year to properly recycle or dispose of hard to handle materials. So many items are wish cycled, streams are contaminated, and so on. We've also been over dependent on one importer for many decades. That chief importer was China, but in 2018 they said no more. They were having a lot of issues with contamination, illegal dumping, hard to recycle or expensive to recycle items, which resulted in a great deal of land, air, and water pollution. So they banned all imports, and within a year they went to less than 1% of what they had previously accepted. And as we've all seen, that was a seismic shift. So after that seismic shift, what did we do in the US? At first, it was so shocking that there was some stockpiling going on. And then that went to a landfill or was burned. And then it began to be exported elsewhere. But the bottom line is our production and use of plastic outstrips the world's capacity to handle it. So to tackle the problem of plastics pollution through recycling or end of stream is not possible. Despite that, there's a lot of investment by big corporations to invest in plastics production. I would again argue that no matter what they bet on, we cannot rebuy into a broken system or a business as usual. This is what business as usual scenario would look like. So what role do universities play? For sure, research and innovation. That's what we are as universities, as research institutions. But also, I would argue, demonstrated leadership on consumption. So as we push for zero waste, how do we move forward knowing these realities. Well, similar to alternative transportation, you can't fix a traffic congestion problem on a 4-lane highway by adding more lanes. You have to solve it with better solutions. You have to opt out of the system that's broken. So for alternative transportation, which I've worked in the past, that's metro lines, that's bus rapid transit systems. For us in the plastics pollution space, it's reduction. Basically, once something is in a consumer's hand, it's too late. The university has little control over their actions, even though we put a lot of effort into changing their behavior at this point. But by reducing the amount of plastic that comes to the campus in the first place, you've now put the responsibility and control back where it belongs. This is similar to what Cassie was talking about plastic bans. And single-use plastic bans are some of the most important. They do require a great deal of institutional investment and working within supply chains, contracts, and policy development. They also require supporting both in culture building and in investment reusables. If you're going to ban something like a plastic bag, you'll need to support that change in behavior to reusables through, for instance, giving a reusable, hopefully carbon neutral bag out at move-in or as a prize at events. In terms of procurement and circular economy, assessment is everything. Your first steps in terms of looking at supply chains, and you need to know your volumes, the types of policies you have, when you buy, the contracts, when they're up, and the best time to do this is during your annual greenhouse gas inventory or your STARS reporting. Also, I'll note it's great to promote the folks who are doing it right. So if a department or part of your campus is investing in the right ways, promoting them through a dashboard or a leaderboard is a great idea. Additionally, packaging is a huge part of plastics pollution, and trash and recycling bags are actually a huge part of university plastic films. So for Mason, we actually have a recycling manager, Kevin Brim, who's not pictured here, who took the liners out of 2/3 of our recycling bins, the ones that had the low residues, and avoided 50,000 pounds of plastic film per year, plastic bags per year, saving tens of thousands of dollars. So that's one of our examples in the guide. Mason Dining has also banned straws at their vendor locations, and they are available upon request, as Christy mentioned. They also supported the ban on reusable, the ban with reusables for sale messaging, and even give the reusable items away at events. So as you can see from the picture, just asking people, do you really need the straw, or skip the straw? Reuse and reduction go hand in glove. So what we usually advise folks in departments around Mason is buy less, buy better. So if you buy less, you can afford to invest in a carbon neutral item with specific sustainability bona fides. So this also helps with some pushback you get from departments as well, who have concerns about student attendance if they don't give away a lot of items, which are often plastic and many are thrown away. We've seen a lot of them in Patriot Packout. You can address this concern by giving them buying fewer items, but giving them away as prizes with a prize wheel or an app, and make sure they support sustainable behavior. So for instance, Mason Dining and Starbucks on our campus gave away hundreds of reusable cups and straws at Mason, and offer an incentive through a coffee punch card program when you bring your reusable cup. So the purpose of these efforts and our advising efforts is to lower the barriers to entry, to make it easier for people to obtain and bring their reusable alternative. So basically lower those barriers. A green fund is also a great way to show the viability of your of these reusable projects. So our Mason's Green Fund is called the Patriot Green Fund. And on the bottom left, you'll notice the water bottle refill stations. A lot of those started through the Patriot Green Fund. Several of our zero waste efforts are also going through the Patriot Green Fund. We have one right now for consideration for reusable containers for our next Mason dining location. That'll be grab and go, and where you can check them out like a library book with your student ID or your college ID. Also, the bag pictured here, Mason Athletics gave out at our annual green game, and they replaced 1,400 plastic bags. So here's just a few other things that Mason has done to support the reusable space. I'll note that Housing and Residence Life also gave out a reusable tumbler and bag at Student Move-In in 2019. So some lessons learned in the reduction and reuse space. Make the business case. There's usually one to be made. And if somebody has a budget for something, if you buy less or combine budgets, you can actually buy better. Also, procurement is incredibly complex and the availability of products changes. So it's something you really need to rely on recognized certifications for or standards rather than just looking up one product and trying to trace its sustainability. You also need to work in concert with your purchasing office and get institutional support for lasting policy change. Some of those recognized certifications could be not all in the plastic space, but Better Cotton Initiative, Climate Neutral Certified, B Corp, 1% for the Planet, Green Seal, BPI Certified Compostable, EPEAT, Rainforest Alliance, and WRAP, and many more. But basically, you just want to use that recognized certification to help you identify products that your university can buy and work to put those in guides. So we've gone over reduction and reuse, which are the first two main strategies. So everybody knows that it's reduce, reuse, but it's not recycle next. The third main strategy is compost, which universities are uniquely positioned for. That's the good news. Based on our waste profiles, universities actually have a good percentage of waste that is paper towels from the bathrooms and either food or the containers that food are in. So by just switching those three streams, you can really start to flip your waste profile from trash to compost and just have those impossible to recycle items as trash. Universities, if you're going to throw something out, compost is the best option since it's a closed loop system and a way to reduce your greenhouse gas footprint. It does take a comprehensive shift and starts with what you buy. You really have to change away from plastics completely to compostables. There really can't be any utensils or cups or anything like that that are plastic on campus from any vendor, because if it gets mixed in with the compost facility won't know if it's plastic or compost. So there is some real messaging and some procurement that needs to be done to keep contamination out of your main system. It is usually the biggest hurdle, which is why a comprehensive shift is necessary. In June of this year, Mason actually submitted a USDA grant with Fairfax City and several farms and a compost hauler for Regional Composting Collaborative. Unfortunately, we did not receive that grant, but it's one of the first ones that I've seen for urban and suburban composting from the USDA. So I'm excited to try and submit again next year. I'll also quickly note that if you focus on a composting system, it can help you with water pollution. So that's a co-benefit through pollution prevention, bioremediation, and stormwater management. We donate ours to a local farm, and based on studies, compost use in agriculture can help reduce the need for irrigation, fertilizer use, herbicide use, and soil loss. Even if you use it on an urban or suburban campus, even in small patches, it can help with drainage and groundwater leaching. Finally, we get to recycling. And even in the recycling space, I would say shift away from plastics toward aluminum and glass, which are endlessly recyclable and recycled at higher rates, as the guide mentions. So if you're trying to get to your zero waste numbers, which is over 90% diverted from trash, you're going to have more success by pursuing aluminum and glass because people do recycle them at higher rates. Cassie mentioned working within or without your pouring contract to pursue that. We actually found out that our glass was no longer accepted or recycled at our local MRF. And within 2 months, we were able to finalize a pilot for a Purple Can Club, which is the Fairfax County program. And the benefits of it are that it employs hundreds of people locally. It also, the pulverized glass goes directly back into bottle manufacturing, municipal works projects, and the like, because it's so clean. So the reason why they no longer accept it in the single stream is because the glass they said it was damaging the sorting machines, but also that it was so contaminated that they couldn't find a market for it. So this helps us find an alternative. It does have some issues, I would say, just because, or some drawbacks rather, just because you do have to drive to it. So there's an access issue there, and you have to put it in one at a time. But it does deal with some of the contamination issues. Again, even with the issues in aluminum or glass recycling, I would remind people to stay mindful about the facts surrounding plastic recycling. Hard to recycle programs are also important. Again, recycling plastic and hard to recycle is not what you want to be leaning on, but it is a good support for all of the other things that I mentioned. There are many hard to recycle programs, some dealing with lab equipment or PPE, some dealing with disposable gloves, trash and recycling bags, packaging film, foil and chip wrappers, and the like. They include Kimberly-Clark, TerraCycle, Trex, Sigma Aldridge, VWR, and others. I would also encourage folks to invest in technology to improve the waste bin system so that you get data back to help with assessment and to help engage the audience at the bin so that they do the right thing, even though you don't want to lean on that again, that end user responsibility. It's good to have that support for them to know what to recycle. Also think at scale and try to purchase 100% recycled when you're going through procurement. So we actually at Mason purchased all of our graduation gowns and have for years that are 100% recycled plastic bottles. We're looking into the same for some athletics gear with the soccer team. We actually, before COVID, we were going to have a donation bin to reuse the gowns from graduation to help students the next year who couldn't afford them. But because of COVID, we didn't have graduation this year. There's also a lot of carpeting on college campuses. I would suggest folks look into recycled options that can be recycled themselves. There are companies doing that right now. So I'm out of time, but I did just want to say, because of the scale of the change needed, the climate and plastics pollution crises, and the fact that the system is essentially broken, we really need some interdisciplinary collaborative effort to figure out solutions. Mason's approach to that is our effort to put institutional commitment behind this problem up to the highest levels, and then also woven into the workflow of staff and faculty. with the launch of the Mason Sustainability Council. So, led by our provost and the senior vice president of finance, this is our effort to address complex issues with real solutions and make sure that there's both operational and academic integration. So I'm very happy to represent the Office of Sustainability at George Mason today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Christy, and I'll pass it back to you.
Put up one more slide so folks can kind of see some of our contact information, and let's see, there we go. There we go. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And Cassie and Amber, thank you so much. You had a lot of great information to share, a lot of details. So I really appreciate that. I know it probably took a lot of time and energy to put those presentations together. So um, I appreciate that so much. As I mentioned earlier, the whole presentation was recorded. I will get this online and share it with all registered participants. The webinar is open for anybody to view, but I will send a link out to all registered participants.